Homage to the root teacher Buddha Shakyamuni. Homage to the wisdom warrior Manjushri. Homage to all the benevolent lineage masters. The Supreme Dharma, infinitely profound and subtle, is rarely encountered even in millions of kalpa. Now we are able to hear, study and follow it. May we fully realize the Tathagata's true meaning. In order to liberate all sentient beings from samsara, please generate the Supreme Bodhicitta. Let us study words of my perfect teacher. The teaching of the common preliminaries from the Longchen Nine-Tick lineage of Dzogchen. This teaching is based on the oral transmission of the peerless guru, Gyalwai Nyugu. It's a collection of Gyalwai Nyugu's recorded instructions. Patrul Rinpoche followed Gyalwai Nyugu for many years and received these teachings 25 times. In the end, he wrote down all the pith instructions from his guru and leaving them as a precious legacy for practitioners of all later generations. This text is very rich in content and carries profound lineage blessings. The whole treatise is divided into two parts. First, the way of listening to the Dharma, and then the main content of the Dharma teachings. When it comes to the way of listening to the Dharma, two essential things matter. First, your motivation, the state of mind you bring, and second, your conduct while receiving the teachings. The motivation includes two aspects as well, the vast aspiration of bodhicitta and a skillful means of the secret mantra. The first is the motivation of the Sutrayana, which is the Mahayana motivation, while the latter is the Vajrayana motivation, which involves cultivating pure perception, seeing all phenomena as inherently pure. As listeners, we should understand from the very start that this Dharma isn't universally accessible. Why do I say that? In modern society, the majority of people don't listen to the Dharma. Even among those who have the good fortune and willingness to listen, their motivation may fall short of what this text requires. Their purpose may not truly be to benefit the boundless number of sentient beings throughout all of existence. It isn't always the case that they listen with a pure perception. On the surface, the preliminary practice may seem like just a basic foundation for all other practices. However, the standard required of those who are permitted to listen is actually rather high. Think of it like a university entrance exam. Without reaching a certain level of ability, you can't even sit for the exam in the first place, because the content being tested is of a relatively high standard. In the same way, before we listen to these teachings, we first need to examine our own readiness and motivation. Some people may pursue the Dharma out of curiosity, some for the purpose of acquiring wealth, or healing illness, achieving fame, or securing employment. These kinds of worldly purposes aren't what this text is about. When you first start studying this treatise, it's important to know that it's a very advanced Mahayana path and also a profound pith instruction. Therefore, when we first begin to listen to this teaching, for those who pursue the 8 worldly concerns, things like fame, gain, praise, and comfort, this teaching may not suit their purposes at all. Their personal goals simply don't align with the profound intent of this text. From the perspective of motivation, we can see the profound and deep meaning of this treatise. The following sections discuss the vast motivation because it's something that ordinary people find very difficult to generate. The motivation of ordinary beings is subject to great limitations. It tends to be limited to benefiting themselves or securing advantages in this present life alone. In contrast, our aspiration should extend to all sentient beings without exception. Our aspiration should be that every single one of them, without exception, may eventually attain the state of complete Buddhahood. No matter how long it takes, even if it means practicing until the very end of space itself. We wish for them to reach the indescribable, supreme happiness of Buddhahood. This kind of motivation isn't something ordinary people can generate, and they can't even begin to fathom it. As Shantideva said, even beings as powerful as Brahma and Indra, great gods in Indian cosmology, or as caring as worldly parents, none of them have ever even conceived of such a vast aspiration, not in their waking hours, and not even in their dreams. You should recognize how profound this motivation is. If you can truly generate such bodhicitta in this lifetime, that's indeed something very rare and precious. Here is how we begin to cultivate it. We should reflect like this: all sentient beings in samsara have been my parents. They have been my parents from beginningless time. When they were my parents, they took good care of me and favored me. They always gave me the best food to eat first and the finest clothes to wear. They raised me with tireless affection and devotion. That's how it is for us as human beings. In fact, all sentient beings in samsara have definitely been our father or mother at one point or another since beginningless time. In a sutra called the Sutra on the Kindness of Parents, there's a relevant story that illustrates this point. Once, when the Buddha and Ananda traveled to the south, the Buddha saw a heap of bones and immediately prostrated, placing his entire body on the ground in a full-length prostration before them. Ananda, unable to comprehend the Buddha's actions, asked, "You're the guide of the three realms, the world-honored one endowed with all virtues. Why are you prostrating to a pile of bones?" The Buddha responded, "In the past, these sentient beings have all been my parents or ancestors in numerous lifetimes, and so we should prostrate before them." The Buddha then spoke at length about how parents lovingly nurture and protect their children, making many profound points on this topic. Therefore, for those who have faith in the Buddha's teachings, the meaning from this scriptural evidence is very clear. All sentient beings have been our parents. The Brahmajala Sutra also states, "All men are my fathers, and all women are my mothers." Thus, all sentient beings in the 6 realms are my parents. There's such a quotation also. Given that we have been wandering through samsara since beginningless time, there can be absolutely no doubt that every single being has been our parent at some point. We can say with certainty that all sentient beings have been our parents. Given the vast span of time that has elapsed and a multitude of complex causes and conditions that have arisen, it isn't possible to immediately identify our parents from past lifetimes. But for those who have genuinely cultivated bodhicitta, this is a deeply held conviction. Whether they are great saints or ordinary practitioners, they hold with deep conviction that all sentient beings have, at some point, been their own parents. At one point during Lord Atisha's time in Naitang, he saw a horse with its neck caught in a tree. The horse was struggling for its life. At that time, he said to those around him, "My old mother is suffering. Please, everyone, help her." So for someone who has genuinely cultivated bodhicitta, it doesn't matter what kind of being they encounter. Whether as exalted as Brahma or Indra, or as small as an insect, they regard every single one of them with the same heartfelt tenderness. Upon seeing any being, the thought of harming them would never even cross their mind, let alone actually doing so. People with bodhicitta will generate the same affection toward all beings, exactly the same degree of affection they naturally feel for their own parents in this present life. Jigten Phuntsok Rinpoche states in Verses on Magnetizing Activity, "All sentient beings in the 3 realms are our parents and should be protected equally with great loving kindness and compassion. All sentient beings in the 3 realms have been our loving parents." It isn't enough to simply show devotion to our parents in this life alone. We should extend that same loving kindness and compassion equally to all beings. Some devoted children will spend everything they have on their parents in this life, yet completely disregard those they consider enemies or people they don't get along with. From the Mahayana Buddhist perspective, the scope of our compassion shouldn't stop at humans. Some traditions have historically seen animals as outside the scope of compassion, treating them mainly as resources for human use. From the standpoint of bodhicitta, this kind of limitation is something we need to move beyond. It falls short of the universal compassion that our Mahayana practice calls for. So this is what is most rare and precious for us. Many people may claim superficially, "I want to generate bodhicitta." It's very easy to pay lip service and say you want to generate bodhicitta. In Tibet and in China, many make that assertion. When venerable monks and great masters give teachings, they constantly emphasize the importance of generating bodhicitta. Those who study Buddhism, recite sutras, and chant the names of the Buddhas, they all talk about generating bodhicitta. But have they actually generated bodhicitta upon closer examination of their minds? In order to generate bodhicitta, it's necessary to consider sentient beings as the object of one's practice and treat one's parents and all other sentient beings with equal respect. Have we ever generated this mind? This is why actual Buddhist practice is so crucially important right now. Why do I emphasize this? Because we must integrate the theory we learn with genuine, heartfelt practice. Without integration, many people engaged in listening to the Dharma or giving Dharma teachings will simply be repeating the words of past masters. Such repetition of words has no great significance. If I'm here, bragging and talking a lot every day, yet I have never contemplated it within my mind, nor have I ever generated bodhicitta for an instant, then I'm just repeating the words of those who came before me. Furthermore, this offers no benefit to my own mind continuum, that is, the ongoing stream of my mental experience. It remains untransformed. And for those who are listening, there would be no benefit either. So as we learn the Dharma, it's essential that we truly recognize that all sentient beings have been our parents. When they were our parents, they cared for us with deep affection. As the great Master Khenpo Notchang once vividly described, even parents who were destitute, even beggars, when they managed to find just a tiny bit of food, perhaps with a little fat or a scrap of meat, they would hold back from eating it themselves and give that morsel to their child first, and if they found some tattered clothing in a trash bin, they would carefully pick out the cleanest or best piece they could find and lovingly put it on their child. So, whether they were wealthy or not, as long as they were parents, they invariably cared for their children. As we mentioned a few days ago, there are a few rare exceptions. These rare exceptions are due to special karmic circumstances from past lives. In general, maternal and paternal love are something so deep that we can't describe in words. Every one of us has been a child. Think about it. How much have your parents given you in this life, and how much have you truly given back? There was a professor who once made a similar observation in one of her lectures, and I found it quite moving. She was, in fact, discussing filial piety in ancient times. Let's think about it. Generally speaking, even a son or daughter who does care about their parents, after growing up, they may not even spare half an hour a month to have a conversation with them. They simply don't make the time, and as a result, parents often feel neglected. Yet parents always long to stay in touch with their children. A mother's love is something truly profound, as it is very clearly stated in Buddhist scriptures. If we want to repay our parents' kindness in this life, we should help them study the Dharma. This is how we can truly repay their kindness. However, since we have generated the Mahayana bodhicitta, acts of filial devotion, caring for our parents, serving them, these are beautiful and important. But from the Mahayana perspective, we can go even further. Merely following Confucius' concept of filial piety, such as washing our parents' feet, isn't enough. I have seen a lot of education on filial piety these days. And at most, people would say that repaying your parents' kindness means washing their feet. Honestly, I don't think washing their feet matters all that much. Whether their feet are dirty or clean makes no real difference. The most essential thing is to purify their minds. Our parents have had greed, anger, and affliction since beginningless time. In their short lifespan, they have had no opportunity to purify their minds by themselves. We can help them eliminate the defilements in their minds with our wisdom and compassion. This is the best way to repay them. This applies to our parents in this life and to all sentient beings, who have been our parents since beginningless time. We need to attain Buddhahood so that we can truly repay their kindness. All these sentient beings have immense kindness toward us. They want happiness, but they don't know how to cultivate its causes, that is, the 10 virtuous actions. They don't want to suffer, and yet they have no idea how to abandon the causes of suffering, the 10 non-virtuous actions. So in other words, what they want and what they actually do are completely at odds. Without even realizing what they are doing, they stumble blindly down the wrong path, just like blind people abandoned in the wilderness. These sentient beings are truly unfortunate. All of these beings, when they were our parents, cared for and protected us with such affection. Their kindness to us has been immeasurably deep, as vast as a mountain, as deep as the sea. These sentient beings, whom we lovingly refer to as our old mother sentient beings, because every single one of them has been our mother in past lives, have sought after happiness life after life. Among all the sentient beings in the world, as long as they have life, they'll desperately seek happiness for the body and the mind. But these sentient beings haven't had the chance to encounter Mahayana Buddhism or a spiritual friend as a guide. They are blinded by ignorance. They don't know how to cultivate the 10 virtuous actions that are the root of all happiness. The 10 virtuous actions that I'll explain below. Because they are shrouded in ignorance, as Shantideva has said, fools seek happiness but destroy it as if it were an enemy. These ignorant beings want happiness, but they don't know how. They destroy their happiness as if it were an enemy. Some want to be wealthy, so they steal. Some want to live long. So they take the lives of other sentient beings to try to nourish their own bodies, and so forth, acting in ways that are the complete opposite of what they intend. Many of their actions are the complete opposite of what they are after. People's bodies and minds reflect all these deluded actions. As a result, they'll never attain happiness. Although these sentient beings never want to experience suffering, they simply don't know how to abandon the root of all suffering, the 10 non-virtuous actions. Sentient beings want to eliminate suffering, but instead they become entangled in its very causes. These beings desperately wish to be free from all the suffering that pervades their mind streams, but due to their ignorance, they are unable to eliminate any of the causes of suffering. Instead, they continue to engage in the causes of suffering. For the sake of happiness, they kill, gamble, and so forth. When you look at the world around us, at how people in society actually live, they are truly in a difficult and unfortunate situation. Especially in this modern era, as science continues to advance. There are more and more ways for people to commit evil deeds. Although there are some ways to create good karma, the ignorance and affliction in their mind streams is extremely severe. The guidance of a spiritual friend is exceedingly rare. One could say the future of many sentient beings is confused, dim, and filled with darkness. It's truly frightening to contemplate. Thus, these sentient beings aren't able to gain true benefits, like a blind person. Completely lost in the middle of nowhere, the boundless wilderness, not knowing which way to turn, truly wandering without direction. It's very painful and deeply unfortunate. That's the situation of beings in this world today. Although they may have a little bit of wisdom about worldly matters, this wisdom is merely a means to create negative karma. They don't know what to adopt and what to avoid. Even the most basic principle is completely beyond their understanding, the idea that good actions lead to good results and harmful actions lead to suffering. Therefore, sometimes human intelligence and development can actually be a form of regression rather than progress. This should be said from the perspective of all sentient beings. Because there are 2 conditions for generating bodhicitta. One is to take all sentient beings as the object and generate compassion for them. Of course, all sentient beings in the world are deeply unfortunate. Let alone humans, for the sentient beings in hell, the hungry ghosts, and the animal realms, when will they ever have the opportunity to understand the principle of cause and effect? It's very frightening, terrifying. Sometimes we should also think to ourselves, will I fall into the 3 lower realms? If I do fall into the 3 lower realms, the chance of ever gaining liberation is extremely slim. One could almost say there's virtually no chance at all. So now that we have finally obtained this precious human body, as many great masters have said, you must seize the opportunity. Otherwise, an evil deed can come from a fleeting thought, a brief malicious intent. As the old saying goes, evil begins in the mind. When evil intent arises, with such a faulty mindset, one can commit terrible misdeeds in an instant. You would feel overwhelming remorse then. So now that we have this human body, we should direct ourselves appropriately. At the same time, we should focus on those confused and unfortunate beings and generate compassion for them. This is what we call the great compassion directed toward all sentient beings without exception. Then we keep contemplating. I'm now listening to and practicing the profound true Dharma in order to help all sentient beings who have been my parents. They are suffering in the 6 realms to be free from all their karmic sufferings and habitual tendencies. To attain omniscient Buddhahood. This section is focused on the wisdom of the Buddha. We have previously reflected that all sentient beings experience immense suffering. When we think about this, we want to help them. Even though we truly want to end their pain on our own, we don't have the means to achieve such a goal. We're essentially helpless without the Dharma. Now we have the opportunity to meet the Mahayana spiritual guides and Mahayana Dharma teachings, and our mind continuum is also a suitable vessel for the Dharma. Now that all these fortunate conditions have come together, I feel that we really need to listen to the Mahayana Dharma that severs the root of samsara, and not just listen. We need to genuinely reflect on these teachings and put them into practice with unshakable perseverance. The purpose of doing this isn't for the sake of gaining happiness for ourselves, nor for us to gain temporary fame, and so forth. It isn't like that. The intention should be for all sentient beings who have been our parents, who are now wandering in the 6 realms of samsara. They have been experiencing the boundless and varied sufferings of the 6 realms. Because sentient beings' karma differs vastly from one being to the next, the types of suffering they experience are incredibly varied and complex. So sometimes, whether in a quiet place or during our meditation, we should reflect in our minds. Right now, countless sentient beings haven't attained liberation. They are always bound by karma and afflictions, and this suffering is indescribable. Given all of this, as practitioners who have generated bodhicitta, we must firmly resolve to liberate every single one of them from suffering. To liberate them, the only way is for us to learn the Dharma and practice the Dharma. So our continuum will be free from the net of afflictions. At that time, we can attain Buddhahood and liberate all sentient beings. Put simply, I listen to the Dharma precisely in order to liberate all sentient beings. For the sake of all sentient beings, I resolve to attain perfect Buddhahood. As Maitreya explained, there are 2 conditions for generating bodhicitta. Firstly, we aspire to benefit all sentient beings. Secondly, we aspire to lead those beings to attain the fruit of perfect enlightenment. This twofold aspiration is what we call bodhicitta. We should strive to maintain such bodhicitta at all times, in every situation. In fact, this method of practice is taught to us in the form of pith instructions in the preliminary practices. Thus, in Tibetan Buddhism, it's truly regarded as the most profound guiding light. This book of pith instructions is extremely rare. This time, we won't rush. I'll teach as much as I can each day, without forcing the pace. As you listen to it, I would really encourage you to integrate the content into your own mind, again and again. Think of these Vajra words of Patrul Rinpoche and compare them with your mind as an ordinary person. It's like looking carefully in a mirror. You examine your reflection closely, checking for any flaws or blemishes you might have missed. In the same way, we use these teachings as a mirror for the mind, and we check again and again. When you look honestly, you may discover that even during the time you've been studying Buddhism, let alone before you started, the karma we have created in the past is unimaginable, and even after learning the Dharma, many of us may become only superficial practitioners. Whether we're listening to the Dharma, practicing it, or doing volunteer work for it. I'm afraid we can't call that Mahayana. Let alone qualifying as Mahayana practice, we may not even be touching the edge of Hinayana, the foundational vehicle teachings. If that's the case, no matter how much we promote ourselves, we're drifting away from the true Dharma. In the past, after I gave some teachings, some people would share with me that I didn't understand the Dharma before. Now I can understand a little bit. But actually, you have to really integrate the content of the preliminary practices with your mind. You have to continue reflecting. In fact, the deeper you contemplate this content and try to apply it, the more challenging it becomes. When we first talked about generating bodhicitta, people thought it was easy. We must generate bodhicitta before listening to the Dharma, and especially before teaching it. Anyone can say it out loud. I've been saying it for over 20 years, and I say it every time I teach Dharma. That sometimes, when I compare the mind of bodhicitta with my deluded mind, I feel genuinely embarrassed. Despite having said it countless times over the years, every time I examine the thoughts in my mind, do I have the intention of benefiting all sentient beings? Or am I now truly doing everything for the benefit of all sentient beings? I often find that I'm not truly in either of those states of mind. Instead, I'm just going through the motions as if completing a daily task. I often find myself in what we call a neutral state. Not actively virtuous, not actively harmful, just going through the motions, and that's actually quite alarming. Every day I show up simply because I can't miss a class. The moment I arrive, I'm in a daze. I suppose I'm doing it for all sentient beings, but really, I have no real awareness of that intention at the time. That isn't right. So when anyone hears the idea of generating bodhicitta for all sentient beings, the mind can be transformed right at that moment. If you can transform the intention, in that instant, all the merit will be gathered. This is a crucial point. It also has to do with your daily practice. If you don't engage in your own practice, even if you've been listening to the Dharma for years, you may not generate bodhicitta. Every time you engage in good deeds, for example, you recite and do your daily practice every day. At this point, have you ever thought that you're doing it for the benefit of all sentient beings? This is the most important question, to put it simply. However many good deeds you do, you should first think, I'm doing this for all sentient beings. This is very important. This kind of motivation is absolutely crucial. It applies equally whether you're listening to the Dharma or engaging in any form of practice. By doing it this way, whether you're listening to the Dharma in person from a master or engaging in modern ways of learning, such as recordings, podcasts, online videos, whatever format you prefer, at that time, you need to generate bodhicitta first or apply it in your practices. The scope of Dharma practice here is quite extensive. In general, the practice of all good deeds is called Dharma practice. Whether it's rescuing animals from harm, reciting mantras, or doing charity work or volunteering for a Buddhist cause, are these Dharma practices? Yes, they are. Why? The word practice here means to familiarize yourself with something through repetition. And Dharma in this context refers to virtuous actions. So Dharma practice really means making virtuous actions a habit, weaving them into your mind stream continuously. In this sense, all charitable acts should be considered Dharma practice. At all times, it's truly important to generate this kind of mind. In the past, Jigme Lingpa also said, what we call bodhicitta is fundamentally a mind that is free from all selfishness. As a hungry person seeks food, or a thirsty person seeks water, the mind that seeks Buddhahood is called bodhicitta. One should understand bodhicitta in this way. It's a very strong desire to attain Buddhahood for the sake of sentient beings. Therefore, it's very important to generate such a strong aspiration at all times. This kind of fervent, unwavering longing to attain Buddhahood for the sake of others is the very essence of bodhicitta. Whether the virtue you practice is great or small, if it's accompanied by skillful means, it's called the superior motivation of the preparation stage. If the virtue isn't destroyed by adverse conditions, it's called the unobstructed superior application. In the end, we must seal it with dedication to make the virtue grow and flourish. This is known as the superior conclusion of dedication. These are the three superior principles which have been introduced many times before. Regardless of the amount of virtue you have accumulated, some may be seemingly grand on the surface. You may have heard, this person has accumulated such a great amount of virtue, such as rescuing thousands of yak from slaughter all at once, or building a multi-storey auditorium or monastery, and so on. Those all look very impressive. On the contrary, some people do very small virtuous deeds, like reciting a single Avalokiteshvara mantra or the name of a Mittabha Buddha, which has little visible impact. Whether you conduct great or lesser virtuous deeds, at the beginning, you should always start with the supreme bodhicitta mentioned earlier. This is what we call the superior motivation of the preparatory practice, the indispensable first step. When starting out, any virtuous action must include this. Thus, in Tibetan Buddhism, whenever we recite or conduct any virtuous deeds, we begin with the refuge and bodhicitta verses, so that obstacles won't hinder this virtuous act in the middle. Of course, if you have some experience and insights from practice, you might be able to abide in the view of Dzogchen. Mahamudra. Muhammad Hayamaka, or have some experience of the perfect wisdom of emptiness. These are the unobstructed superior applications for higher practitioners. If you don't have this capacity yet, you still need to carefully engage in the performance of the virtuous deeds without being distracted or being on autopilot. It isn't acceptable to be inattentive or unconcerned about doing the virtuous deed. This is called unobstructed superior application. It basically means being fully attentive to any virtuous action all the way from the beginning to the end. One should remain focused. For example, when we attend a teaching, some practitioners are very attentive and concentrate on the teaching, while others start out paying attention but gradually lose focus as the teaching goes on. Their concentration fades little by little. This isn't what is meant by unobstructed superior application. One could say that unobstructed superior application means being very focused. In the end, when the merit grows and flourishes, it should be sealed with a dedication verse. Think of it like carefully depositing your money in a reliable bank. Once it's deposited, it earns interest and keeps growing. But if you never deposit it, it can be stolen, lost, or squandered at any moment. It could be stolen by others or spent recklessly, etc. Once you've placed it in the account, not only will it not be exhausted, but it will continue to increase. That's why a lot of people attach great importance to dedication verses. In Tibet, many senior practitioners, when they are meditating or doing good deeds, if something suddenly comes up before they have dedicated the merit, they'll tell you, wait a minute. I'll talk to you after my dedication of merit. Or, wait a minute, let me dedicate the merit first, then I'll attend to you. Many people have this habit. So when we perform good deeds, if we don't have time to recite long aspiration recitations at the end, as we've mentioned before, we can recite this. Just as the Bodhisattva Manjushri attained omniscience. And Samantabhadra too. All these merits now I dedicate to train and follow in their footsteps. By sealing with such a dedication verse, merit will continue to grow until we reach the fruition of Buddhahood. I have been explaining these 3 superior methods to you constantly. Having discussed them, I hope you won't regard them as a 1 or 2-day enthusiasm. These should be practices that you'll never forget for the rest of your life. Personally, the teachings in the Dzogchen preliminary practices aren't something I can learn in a day or 2. Learning them isn't like reading a newspaper. You don't just read them today and toss them aside tomorrow, the way you might flip through a newspaper, scanning for the latest headlines and then tossing it aside. You don't throw them away and say, in terms of understanding, I've got it. It's not like that. Many senior Tibetan Buddhist practitioners regard it as a wish-fulfilling jewel. In the past, living conditions in Tibet weren't good. It's said that some practitioners would even offer a yak in exchange for a beautifully handwritten copy of the words of my perfect teacher. Back then, the yak was equivalent to about 1/3 of a middle-class family's wealth. So people truly treasured this text. So many people took it very seriously. But now there seem to be more books available. So you can choose to carry this Dharma text with you or not, it's up to you. But if you have a frivolous attitude toward this book, the blessings and transformative power of the text will have great difficulty dissolving into your mind. This time we can go into more detail of teaching on this text. It may be difficult to keep these commentaries with you at all times. But I do hope you'll keep the verses from the way of the Bodhisattva and the Vajra words of Patrul Rinpoche from the words of my perfect teacher close at hand. These books should be carried with you at all times to serve as your spiritual friend. Because it's difficult for a spiritual friend to be with you every day. If your teacher follows you all the time, you may get annoyed. There may come a time when you feel you don't need your teacher any longer. But this Dharma text is a teacher without anger. At any time, once you open this book, you can resolve all your questions, such as how to overcome your afflictions and sufferings in your own mind continuum. Whenever you open the book, it can immediately give you peace. So we should treat it as a very precious text. Listening to the Dharma is no exception. First of all, it's truly important to give priority to the method of listening. Motivation, above all else, takes the leading role. As we've just discussed, the three supreme methods should never be neglected. All virtuous actions should ideally be accompanied by these three supreme methods. They are indispensable. These three supreme methods should be practiced during any Dharma practice. As I said, it's truly important to give priority to the method of listening, especially when it comes to motivation. It takes the lead. Now, listening to the Dharma in the following part is also very important. If you don't understand a way of listening to the Dharma, then simply sitting there and listening may not bring you any real merit at all. The sutras say, if the method of listening isn't in accordance with the Dharma at all, then it's better not to listen. If you develop anger or greed while listening to the Dharma, then you should stop listening. You can just get up and leave immediately. That would be fine. I mention this just as a small example. The day before yesterday, some lay practitioners got up and left during the teaching. I wondered if it was because they developed greed or anger, or maybe they were new here and didn't understand the etiquette. It could also be the case. The way of listening to the Dharma is very important. It's the root of all virtue. Especially when listening to the Dharma, although there are many requirements, motivation is the most important. As the great Master Jigten Lingpa states in a treasury of precious qualities, what makes an action good or bad? Not how it looks, nor whether it's big or small, but the good or evil motivation behind it. In other words, all merit depends on whether your mind is virtuous or not. The purer and more altruistic the motivation, the greater the merit that results. If your actions are supported by bodhicitta and renunciation, even when they look modest on the outside, the merit you generate is actually immense. Indeed, not how it looks, nor whether it's big or small. As for how it looks, some people may spend a lot of money to build a 13-story auditorium or a temple. This seems to be like generating incredibly great merit. And many people might think, how fortunate! I wish I had such merit. But if the motivation is the sense of competition with others or a desire to show off, tainted by various afflictions and negative emotions, then even such an apparently grand virtuous deed will have little merit because it isn't supported by the right motivation. But if you really act with bodhicitta, even if it seems like a small action, the merit it generates is immeasurable and limitless. In the Sutra of the Wise and the Foolish, there's the story of a poor woman who offered a lamp. The woman managed to get a bit of lamp oil with great difficulty, and after offering it with bodhicitta, even the accomplished Sravaka, a senior disciple of the Buddha, couldn't extinguish the flame. So in our daily lives, even with just a little money or a small opportunity, we should integrate it with bodhicitta. Take someone whose negative karma is very heavy. They may only have the chance to attend a single teaching. Even so, that one session can be complete. At the beginning, they generate bodhicitta. During the teaching, they listen with full attention, and at the end, they dedicate the merit using the sacred dedication verses. Even that one session becomes a complete and meaningful practice. Or perhaps someone isn't wealthy enough to make long-term offerings or practice generosity. But when they happen to have a little money, they might simply buy a packet of powdered milk, a common offering in our tradition, and in their mind, they think, for the sake of all sentient beings attaining Buddhahood, I offer this to the Sangha with bodhicitta. When offering to the Sangha in this way, it's easier to apply the unobstructed superior practice. It can be done within a short period of time, and then conclude it with aspiration and dedication. This action is now complete with a proper beginning and an end. You have completed the whole process of this virtuous action. In your path of awakening, the three supreme methods hold a very important place. In our daily lives, the merit we accumulate may not always be visible. Others may seem to carry out grand virtuous deeds, but merit isn't measured by outward appearances. What matters is the mind behind the action. If the mind is filled with jealousy, competitiveness, or ill intent, then even if one gives the Dharma teachings every day, or listens to the Dharma every day, it would still not accumulate great merit. We need to understand this clearly. If we have the motivation of seeking status, fame, or worldly benefits in this life, then no matter how much Dharma we listen to, none of it will truly become the authentic Dharma within our own mind streams. If, in the process of listening to a teaching, we become preoccupied with thoughts like, Will I get a certificate or the status of a Dharma teacher? Will I get a doctorate or a master's degree? In different Buddhist traditions, there are various titles and ranks for teachers. Kenpo, Atisha, and so on. There are multiple levels of these titles. Even among lay practitioners, there are ranks. So it's easy for Dharma students to develop such thoughts. The other day, someone actually said to me, "I really want to become a lay Dharma teacher. Could you give me a certificate first?" Before even completing any study, asking for a certificate. That's a bit inappropriate, is it not? Seeking fame and other worldly things, such as listening to the Dharma merely in the hope of having a harmonious family, to prosper in business, to become eloquent, to have a steady flow of wealth, and so on. There are so many worldly goals. With such goals or motivations, no matter how much Dharma you listen to, it may not become the true Dharma in you. Why is it not true Dharma? It can still become a virtuous route, but it won't become the true Dharma. The purpose of the true Dharma in Mahayana is to benefit all sentient beings and eventually lead them to Buddhahood. With this purpose, if your motivation isn't correct, you'll commit downfalls. There was a time when Lord Atisha felt particularly sad. Then Dromtonpa asked him the reason of his sadness, and he replied, "There was a disciple who practiced the black Vajra subjugation but ended up falling into the lower realms. In principle, practicing Tantra or Tantric deities shouldn't lead one to the lower realms. But because he practiced it with a malicious intention of subjugating others by reciting the names of the deities over and over again, he ended up falling into the lower realms. So motivation is very important indeed. When the motivation is pure, everything is pure. For example, if the root of a tree is poisonous, then its branches, leaves and fruit are all poisonous. If its root is medicinal, then its branches, leaves and fruit are all wonderful medicine. So looking inward and carefully tuning your motivation at the very beginning is of the utmost importance. Before anything else, we must turn our attention inward. Adjusting your mind is extremely, extremely important. No matter what you want to say or do, the first step is always to observe your own mind. And if you feel the desire to move, or even to speak, examine first what is in your mind, for the steadfast should act correctly. As I mentioned before, no matter what you want to say or do, whether you're doing a virtuous deed or something else, you should first observe your mind. In the end, when you find out, this time I'm really doing this for the benefit of all sentient beings, then you can carry on doing it. If you know how to tune your motivation like this, it means that your virtuous action has been integrated with skillful means. In this way, it will become a gateway to the immense merit of the Bodhisattva's path. If you already know how to tune your motivation, and your mind has been tuned to benefit all sentient beings, then your virtuous action has been integrated with compassionate bodhicitta, or integrated with the skillful means of bodhicitta. In this way, even if you have done a small virtuous deed, it actually becomes the cause of the immense merit of the Bodhisattva's path. Because even a brief moment of genuinely reflecting on how to benefit sentient beings is also incredibly meritorious. The mere thought of benefiting sentient beings surpasses offerings made to all the Buddhas. Shantideva said, "Just the thought of benefiting others. Its merit far exceeds the offerings to all the Buddhas." If we don't have this motivation, then none of our actions of body, speech or mind can become the cause of Buddhahood. Without generating bodhicitta, one can never attain Buddhahood. There is simply no other way. The explanation of bodhicitta also mentions this. In short, even the mere generation of an altruistic mind. The merit is indeed great. In the Sutra of Kandratara, which I believe is quoted in the Finding Rest in the Nature of Mind, it says, "The mere cultivation of an altruistic mind brings immeasurable benefit. Just by having an altruistic mind, one gains immense benefit and merit, let alone actually putting it into action." So in our daily lives, we really do need to examine and adjust our behavior in light of these principles. Adjusting your mind is very important. Conversely, if you don't understand how to tune your motivation, no matter how committed you seem to be to listening to the Dharma and practicing it with great effort, it remains nothing more than superficial practice, a hollow performance with no real substance. If you don't tune your motivation, you'll just wear tattered clothes and attend classes every day. You look very focused. People might say, "This person is a real ascetic. So admirable." But without the proper motivation, in fact, it's just a superficial act of listening to the Dharma. It hasn't become a real cause of liberation. Every day one pretends to be listening, practicing and meditating on the Dharma. Some really seem to be very diligent. But if the inner adjustment hasn't been made, and one's mind is always self-centered, one might think, will many people make offerings to me if I do this? Will many people praise me if I do this? Some people might be like that. When we visited Wutai Mountain, we sometimes saw people meditating. I will share an example. I mention it not to criticize anyone, but to illustrate how easily outward appearances can diverge from inner motivation. When we approached, they would close their eyes, but when we were far away, they would keep their eyes open and look around. This also happens in Chinese Buddhist communities. When I went to Lhasa, I saw some monks begging for alms or money while holding a bell and a vajra and chanting praises to the 21 Taras. When people came up to them, they would start chanting Om Te Tatari Chio Svaha. But if there was no one there, they would stop chanting. They were always like that. They pretend to be very diligent, but were putting on a show for money or for other purposes. So doing virtuous deeds superficially not only accumulates no merit, but also creates faults. If one truly acts with the motivation to benefit others, even if the time spent is short and the deed seems small, the merit will last until the attainment of Buddhahood and won't be exhausted. So now that we have understood this principle, we shouldn't praise those superficial behaviors. Of course, when someone's work in spreading the Dharma and benefiting beings genuinely grows in scale. When one's work for the Dharma genuinely grows, one's public profile inevitably becomes visible. That can't be helped. Apart from that, deliberately showing off or boasting about one's accomplishments in front of others serves no genuine purpose and has no real meaning. So whether we're listening to the Dharma, doing deity practices, reciting mantras, prostrating, circumambulating, or just reciting an Avalokiteshvara mantra, etc., these should all be integrated with bodhicitta. This point is crucial. So, through the above analysis, you have now understood that when we practice Buddhism in this world, whatever our practice may be, listening to Mahayana or foundational vehicle teachings, visualizing Manjushri, Avalokiteshvara or other deities, practicing deity yoga, or reciting mantras such as the rebirth dharani or the 100-syllable mantra of Vajrasattva. Doing the preliminary practices, prostrations, circumambulating the mandala, stupa, scriptures, or monastery, or even reciting a mantra as simple as Om Maripadnham. It's best to integrate these virtuous activities with bodhicitta in your mind. This is very important for you to remember. So even if you hold a prayer wheel in your hand and turn it for a few minutes, in those occasions, it's best to generate bodhicitta at the beginning. When doing things for others, especially now, when many people are motivated to spread the Dharma and benefit beings during the process of those deeds, for example, if I make a phone call today for a charitable cause, if you can make that phone call while maintaining mindfulness and awareness, starting with the thought, "Today, I'm doing this for all sentient beings with this kind of intention," the merit is indeed tremendous. The Mahasamnipata Sutra mentions, Bodhisattva Ratnapani asked Bodhisattva Akashagarbha, "What is the root of all Dharma?" Bodhisattva Akashagarbha replied, "Bodhicitta is the foundation of all Dharma." In other words, all Dharma abides in bodhicitta and grows because of it. When supported by bodhicitta, all virtuous actions are able to grow. Without bodhicitta, even if we seem to be doing great virtuous deeds, in fact, the power of that virtue is still not great. So we need to take the aspiration of bodhicitta seriously. We have already discussed the generation of bodhicitta above. It has been discussed many times before, but here it has been presented in the form of brief instructions. I hope everyone will practice it. It's easy to pay lip service to it, but in actual practice, whether or not you can generate this mind depends on your own practice and experience. We don't necessarily praise someone for achieving the 5 eyes and 6 supernatural powers today. or for having seen bindus, or for realizing luminosity. We aren't talking about these advanced aspects for now. What we're discussing here is the very foundation of the Ngondro, the preliminary practices, and that foundation is bodhicitta. So ask yourself, can my actions truly become Mahayana virtue? If the answer is yes, then at the very beginning, my intention must be for the benefit of all sentient beings. Once that's in place, the first of the three supreme methods, the supreme motivation, is fulfilled. If it isn't fulfilled, then many of our so-called Dharma practices are really quite lacking. So there's still a lot of effort to be applied. The first essential point is how to integrate the actions with bodhicitta. This is extremely important. It's the very heart of the matter. Okay, we'll stop here for today.
Bandangara Badna Asadarda Bandangara Badna Asada Bandangara Badna Asadarda